Welcome back. As we mentioned off the top, President Trump wrapping up his Asian trip with a visit to the Philippines, and controversy, as it often does, has followed him there. The White House saying the president discussed human rights briefly, their words, but the Philippine government says subject never even came up. That's a big issue because human rights violations is a big issue there. Here's President Trump with President Duterte, the Filipino leader, a one-man human rights disaster. He's bragged that he's personally killed and that he's cheered on the killing of thousands of people in his country's war on drugs, none of whom even went to trial first. Now, Trump seems to embrace strongmen like that around the world. Remember when he said the Turkish president gets, quote-unquote, very hard marks? Well, that was on the heels of Turkey jailing scores of political opponents, consolidating and increasing the power, and closing unfriendly media outlets in the process, even charging some journalists with treason. Then there's Putin. During this trip, Trump addressed the media and he spoke about both Putin and Russian meddling in our elections, even blasting our own intelligence agencies on foreign soil. Here's part of what our president had to say. Every time he sees me, speaking of Putin, he says, I didn't do that. And I really believe that when he tells me that, he means it. But he says, I didn't do that. I think he's very insulted by it, if you want to know the truth. And then you hear it's 17 agencies. Well, it's 3. And one's Brennan and one's whatever. I mean, give me a break. They're political hacks. You have Brennan, you have Clapper, and you have Comey. Comey's a proven now to be liar, and he's proven to be a leaker. Here to help us sort this out, visiting lecturer at Yale, Jake Sullivan. He was also National Security Advisor to Vice President Joe Biden and Deputy Chief of Staff to Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. Jake, thank you very much for the time. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
You know, what I'm trying to do tonight, if you can help me, is to, regardless of whoever our audience voted for a year ago, to try and put in some context, both in historical terms, but also in terms of significance, that what we are seeing play out is in many ways unprecedented, but also you can argue against American self-interest. Let's just start with Putin first. The idea that on Veterans Day weekend, on foreign soil, he attacks our intelligence agencies and sides with the very government, the very leader, who our own folks so meddled in our own domestic democratic elections. You know, I think we grade on a curve here, but you almost have to do a triple take to actually put that in any kind of context.
I didn't know that Trump could reach even lower than he had when it came to this whole issue of Russia's interference in the election, but he has gone below even the lowest possible expectations with this. I mean, here you have the President of the United States standing on foreign soil and siding with a hostile foreign power who our entire intelligence community has concluded interfered in our election, tampered with our democracy. And you have him basically saying, look, I talked to the president of that country and I take his word for it. That is a really striking thing for the president of the United States to do. And I will say that for the hundreds of thousands of professionals, diplomats, intelligence officers, soldiers who put their lives on the line for the United States, that's got to be a dispiriting thing to have your commander-in-chief side against you and with the president of Russia. And frankly, I think his effort to try to clean it up and walk it back the next day shows that his whole staff understands just how bad this is, but it's clear that he really doesn't get it.
You know, Jake, given how this president has attacked many of our own allies, let alone countless others, the one person that seems impervious from any criticism is, as you said, Vladimir Putin. And more than that, given the ongoing investigation right now borders on the inexplicable, I want you to listen to what Brennan had to say and see if you agree.
I think Mr. Putin is very clever in terms of playing to Mr. Trump's interest in being flattered. And also I think Mr. Trump is, for whatever reason, either intimidated by Mr. Putin, afraid of what he could do or what might come out as a result of these investigations.
Anything I can think, Jake, I can never even imagine anyone saying that about a sitting president, but I can't find another rationale than what he just laid out here. It is inexplicable as to why, given how free he is with criticism of even our allies, why he continues to go to the well in the midst of an actual investigation with Mueller, why he continues to defend Putin. Can you make any sense out of it other than what Brennan just laid out?
Well, I think things are unfolding here on three levels. The first level is that it's clear that the way to Trump's heart as president for any country around the world, whether they share our interest or not, is to flatter him. We see that in the way that Putin has said nice things about Trump in the past, and Trump laps it up. We saw that most recently with Trump's trip to Beijing, where they rolled out the literal red carpet for him, and he spent his entire time there not defending American interests, but crowing about how well he was treated and what a good reception he got. And by the way, ended up saying a heck of a lot of nice things about the Chinese because they said nice things about him. So that's the first level. If you're nice to Trump, he'll be nice to you. And that's a scary thought when you think about him rolling over in the face of some of our adversaries. The second level is that Putin operates in a completely separate category from him for everyone else. Even on top of the flattery and the obsequiousness, there's a deference that he gives to Putin, a kind of guilelessness. Him saying, look, Putin told me that this hurts his feelings, and I believe him. I think it does. I think he's insulted by it. There is something unique about the way that he defers to the president of Russia, which suggests either a longstanding affinity for him and for Russia, or, as Director Brennan was suggesting, that there's something else that we don't know about the relationship between Trump and Russia. And then finally, Trump seems to enjoy attacking the professionals who make up our national security service. He's been doing it for months. He went to the CIA and stood before the stars on the wall that denote fallen CIA agents in the field, people who gave their lives for this country. And he basically attacked the intelligence community as somehow anti-American. So he has no trouble flouting the basic norms of being commander-in-chief because he sees these people as somehow not on his team when they're on America's team, but they're not on Trump's team. And so I think at all three levels, you're seeing something here that, as you said, is completely unusual for an American president and is deeply disturbing. And every American, regardless of party, should want to pull together and say, we demand more of our commander-in-chief.
You know, General Kelly said something that with the fire hose of news that came out, especially in the last 72 hours, almost got forgotten. But when asked some of the reactions to President Trump's tweets, he said, they are what they are. But like you know, in preparation for this trip, we did the staff work, we got him ready to go, and then at each place we briefed him on whatever the next event is and all that. The tweets don't run my life. Good staff work runs it. That's the chief of staff, almost as if he's disregarding what the commander-in-chief is saying. There seems to be almost a disconnect where, you know, he said what he said about the intelligence. We got in his ear and reminded him that now they're his intelligence agency. And by the way, you know, when he denigrates the entire ones, he's denigrating his own CIA director, et cetera. And he did that modified hangout as he did the following day. Is he completely rogue here? Do people, I mean, you've worked in an administration before, you've worked in the State Department before. How much of an actual platform or a policy is going on here, or just does it go meeting to meeting? Who's nice, who gives them a medal, who gives them a standing ovation? How much of it really is off the cuff?
Oh, I think Trump is operating entirely off the cuff. I think he has one thing in mind, which is what's in it for Donald Trump. It's not what's in it for the United States or how do I advance America's interests. It's how do I advance my own interests. But what Kelly did that really disturbs me is that it reminds me of the old story about the emperor having no clothes. And all of the people around him in that story had to say, no, 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 the emperor is wearing clothes, even though the rest of us could see that he was absolutely naked. The same thing is going on here with Donald Trump. These tweets are having a material negative impact on America's standing in the world. They are exposing us as an unreliable partner, as an unworthy adversary, and as an inconstant actor on the world stage. And with each following tweet, Trump is giving up a little bit more of America's leadership in the world, and yet the chief of staff goes out and says, oh, these things don't matter, pay no attention, look away, we pay no attention to them. This is a classic the emperor has no clothes situation, and it's worrisome that the people around Trump are not recognizing the challenge that he's created through his tweeting and tried to do something about it.
Finally, Jake, as I tried to at the top, let's try and extract politics from this and just get into who we are as a country, what our self-interests are right now in Asia, and why this week actually makes a major difference on both those fronts.
You know, I served in government for 6 years. I had the chance to fly to more than 112 countries in a plane with the United States of America emblazoned on the side, our flag, and I always felt that America at its best could be a force for good in the world, that we could defend our own security and prosperity and make our people's lives better while also doing something that no great power in history has done, also looked out to help people elsewhere, to help them do better as well in a win-win situation. And that's what American leadership has meant. It's meant that we have been able to get stronger and safer and more prosperous over the decades, and that other countries have been able to benefit as well. And what Donald Trump has basically done is he's come along and said, you know what, enough of all that. I'm no longer interested in occupying a leadership role. I am just going to let the rest of the world decide how it wants to deal with itself. And I guess my question to Trump is, if you cede the field to countries like China and Russia, and you give them the opportunity to write the rules of the future and decide how nations are going to conduct themselves in the international system, and the U.S. isn't calling the shots anymore, do you think they're going to do it in a way that helps us? I don't think so. So both from the perspective of what we represent in terms of the values we bring to bear and the beacon of liberty that we've represented for decades, and just out of basic self-interest, the United States needs to maintain its role at the center of the international system, and Trump is essentially stripping that away before our eyes, and this trip to Asia is showing that in living color. And I think it's something that we're going to look back on and see as being essentially us ceding the mantle of global leadership to other countries, and I hope that we can reverse the process before it's too late.
Jake Sullivan, thank you very much. I appreciate the time.
Thanks for having me.
All right, coming up next, everyone, we turn closer to home. The jury back in session at the Menendez corruption trial. We're going to check in on the trial and what could be going on in that jury room. Dominic Carter, he's got a report for us from Newark here, and he spoke to that juror in question who has caused this trial to go up into complete tumult. Stay with us.